Well, it is an uncomfortable conversation we need to have. Roman Josi is officially in a slump after going a full one game without scoring a point. We're kidding, of course. But hey, the Preds won last night, 4-1, in a game that we probably need to dig a little bit deeper into. Plus, the herd line comes up big again, as well as the fourth line. Why are the Preds role players playing so well right now? And Western Conference Wednesday, who has the easiest track in the West to a playoff spot? And how hard is the Predators' road going forward? All topics we'll talk about today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer and editor at ontheforecheck.com, and I have, as always, a partner in crime.
You do. I am Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at ontheforecheck.com.
You got to see last night's game in person, Ann.
I did. Thank goodness I had a waffle cone of chocolate soft serve ice cream to keep me from losing my mind at certain points in the game. But yes, I got to see it live and in person. It was great.
Yeah, it was great. The game itself is weird. Weird is a good way to describe it. The Predators won 4-1. They beat the Ottawa Senators, and they scored 4 straight goals to end the game. You would think that's, a good sign that things are maybe turning around, but then you dig a little bit deeper into the stats, and you start to notice some problems. So, Ann, let's lead it off with your one word to describe last night's game.
Yes. So my one word is despite. So despite committing penalties and struggling at times defensively, the Predators came away with a win. Despite porous at time defense, Juuse Saros threw this team on his back and helped them win. Despite playing a young team that was struggling at times, the Predators had to work hard to get this win. So this was a game of despites. It didn't go the way it should have gone. The Predators did get a win, but it didn't go the way that it should have gone. I guess that's the best way I can describe it.
It didn't feel like a win that you can look at and be like, hell yeah, the Predators are back on track.
Yes, it was not that.
It was more of a win where it was like, it's 4-1. Why does it feel this exhausting to sit through?
Yes, this was not the game that was reassuring to Nashville Predators fans as we're looking at heading down the stretch into the playoffs. Like, we need that game, but this was not it.
No. There is one word, well, I guess kind of 3 words that I would use to describe the game. And do you watch The Simpsons at all? Were you a Simpsons aficionado back in the day?
I was not. No, I'm not I don't know much about The Simpsons.
Man, that's a different topic for the other day. So they do a thing every year called a Treehouse of Horror. And it's basically kind of like 3 Halloween skits every year on Halloween. And there's one where Homer gets caught in alternate dimensions. Kind of like a Ripple timeline sort of thing where it's there's all these alternate realities. There's one where he accidentally goes back in time and ruins something and sets up all these different alternate realities. And it shows him trying to get back to his family, the normal version of his family. And he goes through one where they're millionaires and it rains donuts, but he doesn't know that. And kind of all these wild sort of alternate realities. And he gets to one. Where it's they're all the normal family again. He thinks he's finally made it home, and they're sitting down to eat, and then he notices the family eats like lizards, where they lap their tongues out. And instead of going again, he just goes, close enough. close enough is how I look at last night's game.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, the important thing are points. I am not going to rant and rave about any game in which the Predators get 2 points from here on out.
Fair.
But, textbook is not how I would describe the game because I thought the Ottawa Senators, for the most part, outplayed the Predators in most of the game. So that's something that I think the Predators really are going to have to dive into. But, at the end of the day, they did get 2 points. So, it's weird where it's like, you don't want to be like, yeah, that kind of performance is going to get us far into the postseason. But you also don't want to like minimize the fact that, hey, the Preds found a way to win this game. So it's like difficult.
Yeah, you have to sort of balance. This game brings up feelings, and some of them are very uncomfortable. And I think you kind of have to balance it. I agree with you. This is 2 points, and at this point in the season, 2 points is valuable. And I don't necessarily think that the Senators outplayed the Predators. I think the Predators underplayed this game.
Fair. That's a fair assessment.
And I think it's it's very obvious, I think, what went wrong. The Predators had they had 5 penalties in the first period. I mean, we talked about yesterday on our show, the Predators, one of the keys to this game was the Predators needed a hot start. You just simply can't have a hot start when you are committing 5 penalties in the first period. So I think it's pretty obvious how the Predators need to play and what they need to correct. So that is a little bit reassuring. I don't think you have to be Scooby-Doo in the mystery machine to figure out what John Hynes is going to, address in the locker room, or the tone of voice in which he will address those things.
Yeah. One of my second favorite quote from last night's media. We're going to have the first favorite quote coming up in a little bit. But my second favorite quote from media last night was somebody asked John Hynes, Brooks Bratton does his standard, what do you think about the game? Mm-hmm. And John Hynes looks at him and goes, oh, I had a lot of thoughts on the game. So it's like,
somebody's in trouble.
Yeah. Then it's like somebody who it's like your kid didn't study for the exam, but somehow got an A- anyway.
Yes.
And you're like, damn it. Good job.
Yeah. So you need to learn a life lesson, but you didn't this time. Okay.
Yeah. It's like, it's going to bite you someday.
Yes, and it will. The mistakes the Nashville Predators made last night would absolutely bite them in the backside in so many other games. They were very fortunate. In some aspects of their game were good enough to come back and win this game, but there were plenty of aspects that were not good enough. And if you're playing a team other than the Ottawa Senators, this game is not going to get you where you need to go. So they got away with it this time. I think it's pretty obvious what they need to clean up and fix. I think John Hynes will make sure that it's very obvious what they need to fix. But it's a win, but it's not necessarily the win you wanted.
Yeah. Going to go into some of the finer points in just a second, including what the Preds need to improve on. But a lot of stuff did go well, including the depth scoring coming to life. Yet again, we'll talk about what makes them so good, though. First, though, we want to mention today's show brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They're fan favorites with a lot of great people. If you haven't tried the puffs, that's something you're definitely going to want to check out. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. It's not just a protein bar. It's a treat. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. You have that covered in 100% real chocolate. And it comes in a couple different flavors. There's cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, so many others. If marshmallows aren't your thing, which we get it, they still have plenty of normal great tasting flavors like mint brownie, coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, and white chocolate cookies and cream. There's something for everyone. No matter what you get, though, you can guarantee that you'll have a healthy tasting treat. That's because all Built bars are low in calories, low in sugars, low in net carbs, but high in protein. So not only will it help you build muscle, it helps you stay full longer for each day. You can try it yourself. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. That's all one word. Promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Yeah, and we made the joke about it off the top. Was Roman Josi, his long, I think it was 13 game point scoring streak is officially over. He came one game shy of recording a point in every single game in March.
So close.
But it's funny because last night was one of the best Roman Josi games I had seen in quite some time.
Yeah, last night was definitely a strong game from Josi defensively, and thank goodness for that because the Predators needed it for sure. It was so disappointing, though. I will say I was really disappointed that he didn't get a point. I kept thinking at the very end when the Ottawa Senators went empty net, I was like, stick Roman Josi out there and Michael McCarron and let Roman Josi get an assist for the point and Michael McCarron get a hat trick, and we can all go home feeling a little bit better. That didn't happen. Roman Josi didn't get a point, and Michael McCarron only had 2 goals. But it was hard to see that kind of streak end for Roman Josi. I'm sure the Colorado Avalanche fans are like, "See, we told you."
Yeah,
it's McCarr
would have gotten a point in last night's game.
That's right.
Yeah, the analytics guy also would have been like, "See, Devon Toews. That's why you need Devon Toews out there."
Yep. Yeah, but he did have Roman Josi did have a good game. Look, this game, because the Predators started out with so many penalties, this was a dig out game. This was, we weren't far into this game before we knew, it's going to be one of those nights where they're going to scratch their way back into the game. So it just didn't set Roman Josi up for a typical Roman Josi night from the get-go.
But it was because remember, the argument we had the other day when we were talking about, Josi versus McCarr in the Norris race was the fact that McCarr was a little bit better on defense statistically this year. And last night, I feel like was Roman Josi's way of saying, all right, you want defense, we're going to stuff some defense down your throat. Because he proved yet again, like he's not just an offensive minded defenseman. He is a shutdown defender. We saw it last night, like almost 4 minutes on the penalty kill, which, remember at the beginning of the year, he really wasn't being used on the penalty kill at all. And then 4 takeaways last night. So he was active everywhere on the ice. He played almost 28 minutes last night too, which, God, they really need to take that row back, don't they? Like just to take some pressure off of these guys. Also good to see Mattias Ekholm kind of step up with a 3-point night. That's something we haven't heard a lot about Ekholm scoring this year. We know he's capable of it. It's just not really his role with the Preds anymore. So it's kind of good to see him step up and have a big game. And he was another one that I thought played really well, even apart from the score sheet as well.
Yes, I thought Ekholm and Josi both had strong defensive nights. There were a couple moments where some of the other defensemen, kind of struggled with some giveaways, some turnovers in the defensive zone. But for the most part, once Nashville kind of got out of this first period penalty slump, they really did play a much stronger performance defensively. And also cannot say enough about Juuse Saros in this game.
Right.
It is very clear that Juuse Saros is the only one that listens to our podcast because he did what we asked him to do. And he played such a strong game. He was so dialed into this game. And it's hard to quantify how it's almost an eye test, but you can tell when he is tracking the puck and is really on it. And, he faced some hard shots. He had, a 2-on-none. He had some on the power play for the Senators. They had some backdoor shots that he shut down. He had a penalty shot that he was like, not on my watch. So Juuse Saros was the Juuse Saros that carried this team. Unfortunately, this team was the team that Juuse Saros has to carry.
Yeah.
So it kind of balanced out, but Saros had a phenomenal game in net. Just, we've talked about how he's looked maybe a little bit off. He did not look off last night.
Yeah, in fact, one of our listeners, JW Hood, kind of called us out on it last night. He's like, I know you guys had some worries about UC, but how are you feeling right now? After a performance like last night, certainly feeling a lot better. So we will gladly eat some crow on that one. Good to see Saros for real. Kind of the vintage performance that we had seen from him earlier this season. The big stars of the night, though, and for me, was the Predators' depth. That's like the guys that you would consider your bottom six, even though right now they're kind of looking more like your middle six. And that is the Herd line, as well as the line of Michael McCarron, Nick Cousins, and Phil Tomasino. Like those six are once again like, and it's, it's not just them having good games, it's them playing in a way that kind of embodies everything you think Preds hockey should be.
Yes.
It's just like the way they play, the intensity they play with, the push that they get on like every single, play. Like they never take a play off. They never look outmatched against anybody, regardless if it was against like the Senators' top line with like Brady Tkachuk and Josh Norris. It doesn't matter if they're going against like another kind of grit intensity line. They go out there and they play the same way and they win battles. That's the key to me is they're going out there and it's not just, excite the crowd with a couple of, block shots and big hits. They're going out there and making plays, like really good hockey plays. And we're seeing it a lot from the group of six that we're talking about. And that's exciting because that is what a Stanley Cup winner has. Are those sort of role players who not only are going to like, give you exciting minutes that make you go ooh and ah, but they're role players who make plays in critical moments. That's what the Preds have right now in these guys.
Yeah, and I think that's huge because oftentimes you can have a bottom six and what your expectations are is they don't do any damage. And this bottom six really, like you said, instigates things. They instigate play. They reset this team back to forechecking, hard-hitting, gritty Predators hockey. And I think that's something that is really helpful even for the top two lines because they reset the game in a lot of ways and kind of circle it back to where the top two lines can maybe be more productive. So don't underestimate the value of that bottom six, especially coming down the stretch, not just in scoring, but just like you said, in their presence on the ice and what they do for this team.
Yeah. It's funny. We mentioned Michael McCarron. He spent 5 seasons with the Canadiens. He was their first round pick. Let's not forget. Played almost 70 career games with them. Only 2 goals his entire time there. He's had 2 last night. He now has 6 goals and 7 points in 44 games with the Predators this season. So he has done more this year in fewer games with the Nashville Predators than he had his entire career with the Canadiens. And it's a good story too. And it's funny, and I kind of want to get your take on this. It just seems like the Predators have a lot of redemption stories, guys that were like AHL guys. And it's like, oh, why are you playing them? Who wind up having big impacts. I mean, what was our favorite story from a couple of years ago? Rocco Grimaldi.
Yes.
Same thing. And, you're kind of seeing it the past few games with like Jeremy Lauzon. For a short period, we saw it with like Jared Tenorti. You go back and there's like all these like kind of people that have, other teams have sort of given up on or resigned to just kind of having a minuscule role that come to Nashville and find new life. And it's happened under multiple coaches. So, I'm kind of curious what you think the reason for that is, Ann.
I think a lot of it has to do with the style of Nashville Predators hockey. You can talk about Filip Forsberg and how he plays and, his amazing offensive talent, Matt Duchene the same way. But what it all really boils down to here in Nashville is the basics executed well. The Nashville Predators are not a team that are going to wow you with all of their flash necessarily. This is a team that's going to beat you doing the basics of hockey. And I think sometimes players who don't have that kind of zhuzh or extra something in their game are oftentimes overlooked and underutilized. And I think when you come to somewhere like Nashville, it's not necessarily that Nashville's trying to add a ton of fanciness to their game. I think it's really taking what a player is good at and making sure it's the right fit. And I think Jeremy Lauzon is going to be an example of that, where not super successful in Seattle, but he may be the right fit. And I think for all of the complaints that people have about David Poile, I think David Poile really knows exactly what he wants and how he wants to construct this team. And I think he's able to identify players who may be overlooked in fancier systems.
Yeah. And, I think about that. A team that was really good at that over the past few years has been the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
It's that same kind of vibe. Remember, they won a Stanley Cup with Zach Bogosian, Luke Schenn, and Kevin Shattenkirk playing a lot of minutes. And those were guys that, like, a lot of, the expert people from the eye tests down to the analytics people were like, stay away from them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're bad hockey players. And they found a way to be like, you know what? Maybe they're not bad hockey players. Maybe they're just in, a role they're not supposed to be in. We think we can use them differently and get some value out of them. So I kind of get that same vibe from some of the recent signings that David Poile has. Even look at Tanner Jeannot, a guy who wasn't drafted anywhere, like wasn't drafted like to go into juniors, wasn't drafted into the NHL. This time last season, he was in the ECHL. He wasn't even in Milwaukee. He started in the ECHL and ended the year by being a player the Predators protected at the expansion draft. Like, it is crazy. And, we heard, I kind of teased this earlier, my favorite soundbite from last night. Somebody actually asked Michael McCarron about Tanner Jeannot and the herd line and just kind of the energy that they put out. This was great.
Well, our third line is a bunch of mutants. They win face-offs. They're hard on pucks. They chip it in. They play. They're the stuff. They're Predators hockey. Those guys, and I think they really run our team the way we want to play. Our line's a bit different. I think, I'm playing with two really high-skilled players. So for me, I try to play like the guys in the third line and chip it in and play with my body and create some room for those two guys. And I think it's been working because those two guys are really silky and they can make plays with each other. And I just go to the net and, try to cash in on some, greasy rebounds or things like that. So, I think our bottom six has been good. I think, there's always room to be better. And, we're going to continue to get better here heading into the playoffs, and we're excited for it.
First off, can we just appreciate Michael McCarron as a person?
Yes.
Big sexy.
I am horrified and delighted by his nickname. Horrified and delighted. Yes. Big sexy.
We were talking earlier. Does this make Matt Luff, Razor Ramon? Like, does he need to come out and be like the NWO? Philip Tomasino, the Golden Child, can be the Hulk Hogan.
Yeah,
there's a lot of alternate possibilities here, but it's the mutants, the bunch of freaks.
Yes,
doesn't that like embody the identity of the Predators? Like, they're not your prototypical Sidney Crosby, Austin Matthews type guys, but they go out there and play the Predators way. Like, that's just a perfect. And I agree with everything McCarron said. Like, that the herd line was what he mentioned, but I didn't include his line too. Him,
Mhm.
Cousins, and Tomasino, or Matt Luff when he fills in. That line too is also the embodiment of Predators hockey, and I love it.
Yes.
Like, I love seeing that.
Yes, and I love McCarron kind of laughing and talking about, he plays like the third line, but he's got these silky guys, with Tomasino and Cousins on the line with him, but it works. That really works. And there's a part of me, as we talked about yesterday, one of the keys to this game was get that first line going, and the first line really didn't necessarily go, like we would have liked in this game. And I wonder if they're getting away from just that Michael McCarron style of hockey and doing a little too much silky hockey, because they can. And here's the thing, that top line can execute beautiful hockey. They really
Oh, yeah.
can. But I think their success, you think about a lot of Filip Forsberg's goals, and they're the gritty goals. They're the hard-fought goals. Matt Duchene is great when he is forechecking and playing along the boards. He comes out with the puck, and I feel like maybe we're not seeing as much of that from that top line, and that might be why they've been a little quiet lately.
Yeah, that top line is like the burgers at the barbecue.
Mhm.
And, the Herd line and McCarron's line, they're like the potato salad, the
Oh,
baked
yeah.
beans, the deviled eggs. Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, you need a good burger, because
Mhm.
that's going to be what, team, like, your people remember your barbecue by. That's going to be
Right.
what teams, how you have success in the postseason. But if you have good sides, you're really going to round out that meal.
Yes,
And I'm also now
100%.
very hungry.
For
We may need to
sure.
fire up the grill after this, Anne.
For sure.
It's Western Conference Wednesday.
It
So for this
is.
Western Conference Wednesday, we're looking at some of the other teams in the Western Conference and their paths to the playoffs. Which team we think has the easiest path, which team we think has the hardest path, and how that might impact the playoff race. And let's get it out of the way, Anne. The Predators' path is not good at all.
It is brutal. It is. I just looking through all of this, I was like, really?
Yeah.
This is, and we had talked about this earlier in the season. April is not an easy month for Nashville. And as it gets closer, it just looms large. This is when the Predators are really going to have to kick it in, because their remaining schedule is a challenging schedule for sure.
Yeah. So there's this website called Tankathon that measures strength of schedule. And they basically do it with like a combination of winning percentage, points per game, goals, all that good stuff. Nashville, in the entire league, not the Western Conference, has the 5th hardest remaining schedule. And you look,
Yes.
it's like they had Colorado, Florida, Tampa, 2 games against Calgary, 2 games against the Wild. Both of those teams have been red hot. And then you have the Pittsburgh Penguins. And yeah, those are 2 very, very hard opponents. Like, that is a rough April.
It is.
So, the Preds, it's safe to say the Preds have a little bit of an uphill battle.
They do. And it's not even just so much for me, the teams that they're facing, although that is challenging enough. It's the structure of their schedule. So they have back-to-backs. They play St. Louis on the second half of a back-to-back. They play Minnesota on the second half of a back-to-back. Like, these are games that they really need to win in the Western Conference, and they're going to come into them off of a game the night before. And so the structure of the schedule, I think it is a packed schedule, and it's just not favorable in very many ways at all.
Well, it's funny. Remember when you said Minnesota is the second half to the back-to-back?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who the first team is that they play that weekend?
Tampa Bay, isn't it?
Yeah, the 2-time defending Stanley Cup
sounds
champions.
fun.
So, and they play Tampa on the road and then come back to Nashville the next day. So there's also going to be some travel considerations there.
Yes.
As far as other teams, as far as playoff teams in the West, the only two teams you can really look at and say they kind of have an equal level of difficulty for the Preds that are at least relevant to the playoff race are Edmonton and Colorado.
Yes.
Because they're both kind of sandwiched on either side of the Preds in terms of hard schedule. You look at Colorado, they got a game against Carolina, 2 against Pittsburgh, and then they have a showdown with Minnesota and then us. And they don't really play a lot of easy teams. They got Seattle and New Jersey, but that's about it. Everybody else, like one of their weakest opponents is Winnipeg, who right now is on a monumental run, and they're a team that might sneak into the postseason. So it's good. It's going to be interesting to see if Colorado can finish strong too, because you can make an argument that they've played well and look at all these points that have racked up. But you can also argue they've played the easiest part of their schedule. And now it's going to be like, okay, is this just performing really well against, kind of a favorable schedule, or is this team for real? So that's going to kind of be interesting for the Avs coming up.
It's going to sort some things out for Colorado for sure, because they're looking at a rough April. And I also think, even though statistically maybe it's not as high, Minnesota, they have 17 games left as compared to a lot of the teams that have 15, 14, 13 games left. And they end with Calgary and Colorado. So they really, for a team that's kind of still vying for a playoff spot, they're going to have to finish very strong in this in the Western Conference. And it's not a gimme schedule for Minnesota either.
No, I mean, they got a couple tough ones, and there's going to be Preds fans watching those last couple games closely, because that could determine if Minnesota winds up, second, third, if the Predators are kind of still in the hunt, they overtake St. Louis, maybe determine who has home ice advantage for a playoff series against them. So there's a lot of factors to it.
Yes.
In terms of easiest, the Vegas Golden Knights are going to get away with it, aren't they? They are going to get away with this train wreck of a season and get into the postseason. According to Tankathon, Vegas has the easiest schedule in the entire NHL for the rest of the season. They got Arizona, 2 against the Kraken, New Jersey, Chicago, and 3 against the Vancouver Canucks. Also, San Jose Sharks mixed in there. One of their hardest games, according to Tankathon, is the Dallas Stars.
Yes.
And I think they have one more against Calgary too, but these are all should be compared to who Nashville has to play, that should be a cakewalk for a team like Vegas. And when you look at them right now, and it's like they need wins to get into the postseason, you look at that and say, I'd probably put Vegas on sneaking into a wild card spot.
Yes, when you look at their schedule, and they also only have 14 games left. So as you look at it, they don't have very many weeks where they have more than 2 or 3 games. I'm like, they're going to be lounging at the pool at the MGM, just waiting for their next easy game to roll along. Vegas, because of the schedule, Vegas is a team you're going to have to keep your eye on, even though, I mean, really. And the other team that I'm like, oh, come on, is Dallas.
Yes.
They do have 17 games left, but their hardest 5 games are Tampa Bay, Toronto, Calgary, which is challenging, Minnesota, and the Oilers. So, they're not facing the Avs. Do we have to give Vegas and Dallas any advantages, NHL? Do we?
Yeah, and they have, let's see, math is hard. They have about 10 combined games left against Arizona, Seattle, New Jersey, Chicago, Anaheim, and San Jose. And that's going to be a key one to me, because, of course, that looks like who the Predators are going to be battling for position in the wild card race. And Dallas right now has a couple games in hand over Nashville. So that is going to be key down the stretch is they're probably going to have a little bit of an easier route than Nashville. So that is why we really have to be on our P's and Q's for every other game going forward.
For sure. This is going to be an interesting April for the Nashville Predators. They are going to have to clean some things up, and they're going to have to play some really difficult games and get some points.
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, kind of from the aspect of who would you rather play in the postseason of the Nashville Predators. We're looking at maybe some matchups that might be favorable and some teams we absolutely want to avoid. So that's coming up on tomorrow's show. Until then, Anne, where can the fine people find your work?
You can find my work at ontheforecheck.com, and you can find me on Twitter at ANK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. Also be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at LO_Predators. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment. Let us know what you thought of our takes here today, or if there's anything you want us to discuss in a show down the road. That's going to do it for us today on Locked On Predators. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with more Pred stuff.